Hello, viewers. Welcome to another episode of the car program hosted by me. Now, today's episode is a nice one because I get to start with a small story. Once upon a time, sometime last year, I received a call from a friend of mine, and this call came when I was passing time having a couple of beers somewhere. So this friend of mine, they told me that they had seen a car somewhere, and they wanted me and them to go get it, work on it as a project. So again, I came back to myself, hung up the phone for a bit, and I tried to remember the last time I made a decision while having a beer. How did that go for me? So after thinking about that, I picked up the phone, called my friend, and told them, "What car did you say it was?" They told me it was a BMW. So they didn't know whether the BMW moved. They don't know the last time if it moved. They don't know the last time it moved by its own power. They didn't know whether it had issues. So I told them that was the greatest idea I ever had. And because of that, I ended up with that. And that car turned out to be an E39 BMW, one of the best 5 Series BMW has ever built. And the bonus was, it came in a shade of blue that we can call dark blue. I think the best color that the best color the E39 came in is that I can call it sky blue. It's not really sky blue. I don't know the code or the name of the color, but it's a lighter blue than this one. I think this is the second best color you get for an E39. So because we've established that I make very good decisions, it turned out that I've done a couple of repairs on this car already, but I didn't think to film it because, again, good decision maker. So what I'm going to do, I am going to list the parts that I have already replaced and give a small explainer as to what was ailing the car and why the car didn't move and why it was condemned for a long time. So in effort to try and find out whether this car was a worthwhile project car, these are the parts I replaced. It's a short list, so will be done in no time. So I replaced engine block coolant pipes. There's some plastic pipes that run along the engine block. Plastic engine block heat over time, they would degrade, and for sure they had degraded. So I replaced them. It has brand new engine coolant pipes on the block. Water pump, thermostat. I also replaced the water pump pulley. The water pump pulley is a composite of a fiber material, plastic fiber material. It was broken, so that would run the risk of prematurely damaging the belt. I also overhauled the CCV system. The CCV system, which is the crankcase ventilation system, is a system that takes oil vapors that are developed, when the engine is running, there's a lot of heat. So even the oil sometimes evaporates or becomes steam. So the CCV system will take those oil vapors, cool them down, and return them to the oil pan. After the CCV system, I bought a new DISA valve. A DISA valve in the M54 engine it has a butterfly of some sort, like a throttle body, but it's not a throttle body. A DISA valve controls how air enters each cylinder, like in the intake manifold, how the trajectory of air, the DISA valve alters the trajectory of air as it enters the intake manifold. If you demand more power from the engine, the DISA valve will ensure that the air is jetting in a more streamlined manner. If you don't demand more power from the engine, the air will, flow in a curvaceous manner. That's the best what I could come up with. So the car has a new DISA valve. The valve cover gasket is new. We replaced 2 ignition coils after finding out it had a misfire. 2 ignition coils were shot. And to finish up with the engine, I replaced the Avanos oil hose, which is right at the front of the engine. Sometimes these hoses get blocked, and when they clog, oil cannot sufficiently travel from the oil pump to the camshaft gears. Now, when it does that, get a bit of misfires, the engine will not run properly. So the Vanos hose is new to eliminate the chance of a blockage. The oil filter housing gasket, again brand new. And after that, the engine was healthy. The overheating issues, did I say overheating? The overheating issues came to a stop. So after that, we concentrated on the transmission. The vehicle was registering an error with the transmission, and it had put itself in fail-safe mode or limp home mode, where it locks the car or the transmission in third gear. So you end up losing the function of changing gear. So the car will set off on third gear or fourth gear, and you end up not having sufficient power that you'd like. So I tried to find out why, and we found out that the issue was actually an output shaft speed sensor. So the shaft speed sensor was not registering the correct. It is actually mounted at the end of the transmission, towards the end where the propeller shaft bolts on, and it reads how fast the propeller shaft is rotating. So on plugging in a diagnosis machine, I realized that there was no reading that was coming from the sensor. So it was reading a constant zero. So with that, the transmission control unit, the TCM, was unable to know how fast is the car moving, and hence it locked itself in limp home mode. So it was either going to be a wiring issue, or a bad sensor, or a bad transmission, or even a bad transmission control module. So on investigation, I found out that the sensor was bolted in incorrectly, because it works in a magnetic way. It's a Hall sensor, so it was bolted in the wrong way. It was unable to read the number of rotations of the propeller shaft. So I corrected that, poured in new transmission fluid along with a new filter and a new transmission pan gasket, and the transmission came back alive. Up to this point, the car came back. We were able to get all gears. It was setting off of the right gears, 1 or 2, depending on the gradient of the road. We were able to get full power back, and slowly the car was turning out to be a worthwhile project car. So after the transmission, I also bought a new battery for the car, and I replaced the brake fluid. Of course, as a preventative measure, because if a car is, lies in wait for a couple of years, of course, the brake fluid, you always want, to be assured that your braking system is fine. So new brake fluid. So upon doing all that, the car resurrected, has been driving very fine. Power is back, all gears are shifting smoothly. So we want to perform another round of maintenance. We have many more parts that we got for the car, including a radiator, more coolant pipes to refresh the whole cooling system. We have a brand new expansion tank. So we also have a couple of suspension parts as well, but I'll lay them down and show you guys once we get to the garage. So come along with me as we get to dismantle a couple of more parts and put in newer parts, and we'll progress as we find out how, I think majorly I'm done. Yup. It's fixed day. It's garage day. Now, the early bird catches the worm. Mkianza kuamka, nimeanza kudeworm. That's Wangesh, the rapper. Gotes. Anyway, it's garage day. Have to fix or replace a few parts in the car. And weirdly, I've just noticed I'm wearing the exact same clothes that I wore my previous video. Si venye mnafikiria. The only reason I'm doing so is because walai sina nguo zingine. Ni kubaya man, tumaka kitu. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my uniform. I'm going to get my uniform. I'm just trying to make a longer video to seem competent, because why have a 20-minute video when you can have a 25-minute video of someone doing serious things, right? That didn't take long, did it? That's what he said. Woo! So before I begin with dismantling or any job that I'm going to do, I'm going to lay out the parts that we got. I'm going to take the parts out, lay them out so that you can see them. I'm going to put them on this pickup right here. These are brake discs. Lovely. So those are the lovely parts that we're going to be bolting onto the car. We're going to start at the extreme top. That's the brand new radiator. Give it that fresh and confident cooling ability, whatever that means. Then right below the radiator, we have that metal thing with a plastic beige part and some cables. That's the window, driver side window lifter. Uh, BMWs from this age are notoriously known to break this, and when they do break, you try and lower or lift your window, and everything goes however it wants. The window won't lift. Your window, drops or hangs wrongly in between the door. And then right below the window lifter, we have control arms for the left and right side. In between the control arms, we have brand new coolant pipes, radiator top hose, radiator bottom hose, and one coolant pipes. The other coolant pipes, of course, I had mentioned earlier, we had already replaced. So once we are done, this car will have all coolant pipes will be new. Next to the coolant pipes on the right is the expansion tank. And then right below the expansion tank is the MAF sensor. Again, M54 engines with MAF sensors, you have to be on top of your MAF sensor, because if it goes bad, then your fuel trims will be affected. Right below the MAF sensor is the flex disc for the propeller shaft. We want to refresh as much as we can so that we get our ultimate driving machine back. On the left of the flex disc, some fresh brake pads, and at the ends of those two last parts is brake discs. We'll be installing front and rear. These are just rear. The front are, I forgot them at the shop somewhere, at my shop. As you can see, the ones in the car are stock. These ones are they are vented discs, so better cooling, probably a tiny bit better braking efficiency. So those are the parts. Admire them. Coolant is low, like I didn't know. Yo, I rhymed. Coolant is low, like I didn't know. So first things first, we are going to check out the fan clutch. 32 wrench. There are some special tools to undo the fan clutch, but 32 fixed side will do the trick, because the fan clutch on this vehicle is bolted to the water pump pulley, or the water pump rather, and it is ridiculously difficult to get anything done on the engine bay without taking out the fan clutch. So I'm looking for something to beat it. Michael Jackson style. Michael Jackson style. Okay. And for those who are going to say that's not the appropriate way to do it, well, pretend you didn't see this. Okay. Did that work? Did that work? Not yet. So I'm hoping the tension provided by the belt will act as a counter hold. Try that again. That's supposed. Yes, success. What is this? Who does that? This is what you call in French kifiririki. I'm going to set it aside. And then I forgot one thing. It's always good to be a good example to the children, because children, remember, anytime you're about to do something pleasurable, like me now, always remember to put on your rubbers. Ama namna gani, my friends? Strap up. Oh yeah. That's the fan clutch out. I'm going to start taking out the parts that I need to replace. And remember, it's not like everything is broken or damaged. It's just that I just want to refresh this preventative maintenance. I just want to refresh these parts so that to give me that assurance and security that I could do 100,000 kilometers. I could put 100,000 kilometers on this car without the worry that something will go wrong. So preventative maintenance is always a good thing. Okay. Fan shroud.
So I have to take out this coolant temperature sensor that is attached to the bottom radiator hose, because the new pipe didn't come with a new sensor, so I have to reuse this one probably before I get a new one. But of course I have to fight my way through 1 billion kilograms of silicon, because someone decided that the seal provided by the manufacturer was not sufficient enough. So I have to take out this sensor very carefully so I don't break it. And then I'm going to replace it in the new pipe, and then fix everything back together and test out our brand spanking new cooling system.
So I've finished replacing the old pipes, or rather I've finished assembling the new radiator. This is the bottom hose. Coolant level sensor is somewhere over here. No, coolant temperature sensor, sorry, somewhere over here. I'm going to install the new parts, starting with the radiator. And then there's also a new expansion tank that I've also attached to the fan shroud or the fan bracket. So it's just a matter of assembling, bleeding the cooling system, and then we move on to other things. So I'll start by installing the radiator. The radiator fits beautifully. The bottom hose is in. The fan shroud. radiator top hose. What? I'm going to unscrew the bleeding screws because after we refill the coolant, we have to bleeding procedure to make sure that there are no air bubbles in the cooling system, which could cause overheating. Restrict coolant from flowing properly, easily. So we screw the bleeding screws. Coolant time, I'm going to pour in a very special mix of high performance coolant that consists of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. And then we'll now run the bleeding procedure to make sure all air bubbles or all air pockets are drained out of the system. To perform the bleeding procedure, you turn the temperatures to the highest setting, for this case 32 degrees Celsius, and the fan, the blower motor fan, to the lowest setting, and then you mash your accelerator pedal for 10 seconds. These BMWs have an auxiliary electric coolant pump that can circulate the coolant even when the engine is not running. Remember, the main coolant pump in this engine is turned or activated by the belt. So when you want to bleed, you do as I said, and the electric auxiliary coolant fan will circulate the coolant throughout the system, thereby blowing out any air bubbles. Remember, to do that, you have to have a good battery. If you don't have a good battery, then it might affect your battery life, since it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to completely bleed the system. So you can see air bubbles coming out of the bleeding screw at that point, and also at this point. This one is more visible, but currently the auxiliary electric coolant pump is circulating coolant. Remember, the engine is not running, but this is how you properly bleed a BMW. On to the last item on the engine agenda. The only error code this engine or the DME was, the DME is the ECU or the engine control module. The only error that the ECU was reading was the MAF sensor, which is this thing right here, nothing fancy. I've replaced it with a new one, and I expect to see a difference in values of fluctuation in values. The other one was dead, and if we look at our graph here, here's a code reader which has some form of data. We can see engine speed, voltage, mass, airflow, sensor, and the mass and the air masses, the air mass. So right now it's at 0 because, again, I've not started the engine. The previous MAF sensor, even when the engine was running, the values remained 0, whether it was the voltage or the air masses. It was faulty. So remember when I said the consumption in this vehicle was crazy? This was most likely the problem. And remember, the only error code the ECU was reading was the mass airflow sensor. So if the engine doesn't know how much air is going into the cylinders, then it won't calculate the appropriate amount of petrol to inject into the cylinders. So what I expect now is that when I start the car, once the code reader reads a number, when the crankshaft revolves or rotates, the RPM will read a certain number, the mass airflow, if it is good, the voltage will read, and the air masses will read as well. And once they should differ at idle and at when I give it a few revs. So this is a graph. The red line is the amount of air that is going into the cylinders. You can see it is pounds per hour. The green line is voltage on the graph, and the blue line will be the RPM. So let's start the engine as we observe the graph, our graph. So our figures are healthy. Everything is reading. We can see the blue line is the engine RPM, which is at 791 right now, 791.25 revolutions per minute. That's the blue line, the top line. The middle line is the green line, which is the voltage of the MAF sensor, and the red line is the quantity of air that is being sucked into the engine. As you can see, it is pounds per hour. So right now the engine is at idle. That's why the lines are fairly straight. So they should fluctuate with the changing of or when I rev the engine. So let's try that and see whether we're on clear ground. Yep. Yes. Yes. So the peaks, as you can see, once I mash the accelerator pedal, everything is healthy. So it looks like our MAF problem is over, and our ECU now may not have any other faults.